Chapter 5. As I was escorted by robbers back up the river, several things were weighing on me. After a few minutes, I checked the buttons on my coat and asked, "Am I mistaken, or are you not Bob Redcliffe's son?" My captor turned around and bowed with a dramatic flourish. "I am indeed. How kind of you to remember the face of a former tenant on the Brindlelock estate." "Yes, I thought so. You have the Redcliffe nose. But why did you leave a respectable vocation like farming to become a robber? You've probably broken your mother's heart." "Broken her heart?" He stared at me. "Why, I'm her pride and joy. Without me, who would pay to fix her roof or make sure she has bread to last the winter? Not your dear uncle, I'll tell you. He'd as soon see my parents starve than spare a penny for a tenant's comforts. What are drafty cottages and empty cupboards to him when he lives in luxury? But he will pay his due and then some if he wants to see you, his beloved niece, alive again." Beloved would not be the word I'd use to describe how Uncle William felt about me, but Bob Redcliffe's son didn't need to know that. Old Bob Redcliffe had several children, many of which were still living in Easton. I had played with the tenant children as a child, swimming alongside them in Dobb River in the summer, roasting apples with them in the fall, and throwing rocks at the old abandoned church in the winter. I knew all of the younger Redcliffe children, but this man had been one of the older set when I was small. I knew his face, but not his name. He certainly looked like his younger siblings, only he had abandoned the homespun shirt and breeches for a more flamboyant set of clothes. His shirt was crimson, and his pants and vests were black. And unlike any traditional farmer, he wore knee-length boots, like men did in Michaelton, the kind with silver filigree up and down the sides. "And how are Hester and little Bob doing?" I asked, congenially. Eventually, my captors were going to figure out that the Blackwoods were broke and had no money to pay ransoms, and when that happened, it would be a good thing for Mr. Redcliffe to remember that I was an old family friend. "Indeed, how would you know?" he asked in return. "Living in the grand city of Audleton, taking on their westy ways, I'm surprised you even remember their names." Not to be deterred, I continued, "Oh, Hester taught me how to tat. I trimmed an entire pillowcase myself, thanks to her." He stopped and snatched my hands, examining the fingertips. "These are not tatter hands. Hester's fingers fairly bleed in order to feed her babies." He flung my hand away from him. Trying a different corridor, I said, "Your brother, little Bob, could skip stones farther than any boy in Easton. No matter how long I practiced, I never could top more than 4 skips. My brother Bob is dead. He went to join the Navy last year and was drowned at sea. Thank you for reminding me that he will never skip stones again." I stopped on the trail. Drowned? The thought of anyone suffocating, whether on land or under water, was enough to make my heart beat faster. But this was someone I knew, someone I had once shared candy with. "Does that offend your delicate ears?" he sneered. "No," I said, ignoring his taunt. "I'm just tired. And I liked little Bob. Everyone did." He didn't look as if he liked my answer. "Keep walking. I'm getting tired of hearing your voice." The 4 of us eventually came to the robbers' camp. There was a rough but sizable cabin in the clearing, surrounded by a handful of outbuildings and tents of various sizes. Everywhere there were lightning rods, all of them 10 feet tall or higher. The camp was a large one. Beside all the men, women, and children that were milling about, there was also a fair number of animals. I saw horses, donkeys, goats, dogs, and chickens. Right away, the solid scent of unwashed flesh, animal and human, hit me. It was mingled with the smell of campfire, bacon, and fresh oat cakes. I stopped to stare at a woman who was crouching over one of the fires. She was flipping the oat cakes over one by one with her bare fingers. "Can I have one of those?" I asked. "You will eat later," Redcliffe told me. From out of the hut, a fair-haired woman appeared. As soon as she saw us, she ran from the building and into Redcliffe's arms. "Ben, what took you so long?" He leaned down and kissed her tenderly. "It was a long chase, Lucy, but we caught our prey." She looked at him. "Ben, who is she? I've seen her face somewhere." "She's a Blackwood." Her face clouded. "Oh." Then she looked down at my shoes. Quickly she glanced back up at me. "Was it you?" she said. "Were you the one who freed little Charlie this morning?" Before I could answer, a small voice called out, "Papa!" My little friend from earlier today appeared at the door of the cabin. Charlie's ankle was bandaged, and he was limping as he hurried to his father. Ben Redcliffe stooped down and picked up Charlie. "Why, what happened to you?" But Charlie was looking at me with his big blue eyes. I smiled at him. "Hello, Charlie, is your leg feeling better?" Ben Redcliffe frowned. "What is all this?" "Charlie got caught in a trap this morning," Lucy said. Ben's ruddy face paled in anger. "Oswald's been setting traps again in our territory." He put Charlie down and carefully started to inspect the boy's bandages. Over his shoulder he said to me, "And what have you to do with this, Miss Blackwood?" Lucy answered before I could. "I found him by the pines. He told me a lady with westy shoes had freed him and brought him back to camp." "If I'd known I'd be back here so soon," I said to her, "I would have brought Charlie right to your front door." Lucy ducked her eyes, unwilling to meet my gaze. She gave a nod in my direction and took Charlie from his father's arms. "Come on, Charlie, we'll go back inside and do your letters." She carried him back to the hut, little Charlie clinging to his mother, gazing over his shoulder at me, waving his little fingers in my direction. No sooner than the door closed did Ben turn to me and demand, "Did you know he was a robber's child when you freed him?" It occurred to me, yes. He turned around and picked up an oatcake from a pile where they were cooling and handed it to me. "I suppose I can spare this, then." I took it gratefully. I burned my tongue on the first bite, but I didn't care. It tasted marvelous. It was warm, nutty, and sweetened with honey. It was gone way too soon. All the while, Ben was leading me to a small structure the size of a chicken coop. He undid the latch, lifted a door hinged on top, and motioned me inside. I looked in there, curious if I'd see the two familiar faces of my companions, but the place was empty. "Didn't you capture my friends as well?" "No, your escorts escaped, but not before wounding one of my men. If they show their faces around here, they'll pay for their actions. But at least I have all your horses. That counts for something. In with you now, then. I've got work to do." "Ben," I said, half stalling, half curious, "can I ask you something?" "Well?" "How long will it take to contact my uncle?" He shrugged. "Maybe a week, maybe more." I licked my lips. "And what if he doesn't answer right away?" "Why wouldn't he?" I looked down at my coat and ignored the question. "What exactly do you do when the family refuses to pay? I mean, do you just let me go, or do you, well, get rid of me in a not-so-nice way?" "Do you honestly think your uncle would leave you in the hands of robbers?" I pretended to be interested in a knot-hole over the doorway. "I was just wondering about the process. It can't always go your way, can it? I mean, you don't get your ransom money always, do you?" "Perhaps you think I'll ask too much for your life, is that it?" Answering honestly, I said, "Partly." "Your uncle will pay. They always pay. Once a wealthy judge refused to pay ransom for his grandson. That was until word got round that he was dragging his feet. He was so shamed by his neighbors that he ended paying not only the ransom but 15% more to hurry the young man home all the sooner. Your uncle will pay." "But what do you do when you capture someone whose family is poor?" He turned around and pointed to a young woman. "Do you see that girl? We captured her 2 years ago. She's still working off her debt. Not only that, but she married into our clan. There are several men here without wives, you know," he grinned, and then motioned me once more into the hut. "One more question. A favor, really. I do have work to do, Miss Blackwood." "Oh, I understand. It's just that this weather is so nice. I was hoping I could spend my time outside. I'd be glad to let you tie me up to a tree. I wouldn't mind at all. But if you don't mind, I'd rather not be inside." "Get in the hut." I sighed and stooped to go into the little building. Inside, I sat down and bit my lip. This was not going to be a memorable experience. He stooped and looked at me through the open doorway. "And don't think you can escape. I have dogs that can track prey faster than lard will melt in a pan. Try it if you'd like. My dogs need the exercise." The door dropped and the latch was fastened. Sitting there in the relative dark, I thought about hot lard in the pan. It made me think of sweet cakes again, but not for long. The air was warm and heavy, and the hut was hardly big enough for me to sit up straight without brushing my head on the top of the ceiling. My chest began to feel tight, and I got that queer taste in my mouth whenever I began to panic. Looking around, I saw that there were cracks between the slats. Seeing a stick on the floor, I found a convenient crack between 2 slats and began to force the stick through. As I hoped, the slats were half rotten and gave with the pressure. I made a large opening, wide enough for me to put my fingers through. Then I repeated the process wherever the wood was weak. I had no intention at this time to escape. My only purpose for the moment was to breathe. By the time I had done with my work, sunlight was pouring in through the roof and walls like water through a sieve. I put down my stick and relaxed. Better. Now that I could breathe properly again, I could think more about my predicament. There was little or no chance that Uncle William had any spare cash to pay my ransom money. I did think, however, that when Timothy's father, Sir John Robert, found out about me, he might be persuaded to lend the money